Look, I need to be straight with you about something most psychology content completely misses. We're about to explore a dimension of empathic ability that goes way beyond the feel-good definitions you've been fed. This isn't about being nice or sensitive. This is about possessing a psychological radar system that can detect manipulation before it even fully forms. Carl Jung spent decades studying what he called psychic sensitivity, the capacity certain individuals have to perceive the unconscious material others are projecting. Jung observed that some people could sense the shadow aspects of others with remarkable accuracy, often before those individuals were even conscious of their own manipulative tendencies. This wasn't mystical thinking. This was documented psychological observation of pattern recognition operating at an unconscious level. A patient would walk into Jung's office, and before they spoke a single word, he could sense a profound dissonance between their conscious presentation and their unconscious state. He described this as perceiving the psychic atmosphere someone carried with them. What he was documenting was advanced pattern recognition, the ability to read micro-expressions, energetic incongruence, and behavioral inconsistencies at a speed that bypassed conscious analysis. True empaths possess what Jung would call active imagination, combined with heightened sensitivity to the collective unconscious. This creates a unique ability to sense when someone's persona, their social mask, is fundamentally disconnected from their shadow, their hidden, often darker aspects. The first rare trait is incongruence detection. This is your ability to immediately sense when someone's words, emotions, and energetic presentation are misaligned. Jung observed that manipulators must maintain tremendous psychic energy to sustain their false persona. This creates what he described as a disturbance in the psychic field, a tension between what they're presenting and what they're concealing. Real empaths pick up on this disturbance instantly, often experiencing it as physical discomfort or unease. Your nervous system is processing thousands of microdata points, pupil dilation, breathing patterns, vocal tonality, word choice, body language, and comparing them against your stored library of authentic human behavior. When the data doesn't align, you get what feels like an intuitive hit. It's your brain's pattern recognition system operating at incredible speed. A patient Jung worked with described encountering someone at a social gathering who was charming, articulate, and well-liked by everyone present. Yet this patient felt an overwhelming sense of wrongness they couldn't explain but couldn't ignore. Jung helped them understand they were perceiving the enormous energy expenditure required to maintain such a polished facade. 6 months later, that charming individual was exposed for financial fraud affecting dozens of people. The second rare trait is shadow recognition. Jung's concept of the shadow represents everything we've repressed, denied, or refused to acknowledge about ourselves. Manipulators carry massive shadow material, rage, envy, contempt, predatory impulses that they've learned to hide behind sophisticated social masks. But you can sense their shadow because your own relationship with your shadow is more integrated. When you've done the difficult work of acknowledging your own darkness, your capacity for selfishness, your moments of cruelty, your hidden resentments, you develop what Jung called shadow literacy. You can read the shadow in others because you're no longer projecting or denying your own. While others are charmed by the manipulator's persona, you're picking up on the shadow leakage, those micro moments when their true nature bleeds through the carefully constructed image. A manipulator approaches with excessive flattery. Most people feel flattered. You feel disturbed. Why? Because your empathic system is detecting the contempt hidden beneath the praise. Jung understood that excessive positive emotion often conceals its opposite. Manipulators overcompensate and your system detects the overcorrection. The third rare trait is projection immunity. Jung identified projection as one of the primary mechanisms humans use to avoid confronting their own shadow material. Manipulators are masters of projection. constantly accusing others of the exact behaviors they themselves engage in. You can sense when someone is projecting rather than genuinely perceiving. Projection has a particular energetic signature. When someone is genuinely responding to your actual behavior, there's coherence to their reaction. When they're projecting, there's an intensity that doesn't match the situation, an emotional charge that feels disproportionate, misplaced, or directed at a version of you that doesn't actually exist. Your empathic system picks up on this distortion immediately. The fourth rare trait is energetic vampirism detection. Jung understood the phenomenon of psychic energy transfer. He observed that certain individuals seem to drain the vitality from those around them, leaving people feeling exhausted, confused, or depleted after interaction. This isn't metaphorical, it's a real psychological dynamic involving attention, emotional labor, and nervous system regulation. Manipulators often operate as energetic vampires because they lack access to their own authentic emotional core. Having repressed or dissociated from their genuine feelings, they must extract emotional energy from others to feel alive. They create drama, provoke reactions, manufacture crises, anything to generate the emotional intensity they can't create internally. After spending time with this person, you feel drained beyond normal social tiredness. Your boundaries feel fuzzy. Your thoughts are occupied by their problems. You're emotionally activated hours after the interaction ended. True empaths sense this extraction attempt in real time and often instinctively create distance. The level of psychological insight you're absorbing right now isn't surface-level content. You're engaging with Jungian concepts that most people never encounter, applied specifically to understanding manipulation dynamics that affect your daily life. If this resonates, if you're recognizing these patterns in your own experience, I'd appreciate you taking a moment to like this video. There are 3 more rare traits I need to show you, and they're going to completely shift how you understand your empathic abilities. The 5th rare trait is narrative inconsistency detection. Jung was deeply interested in how humans construct personal narratives, the stories we tell ourselves and others about who we are. Manipulators must maintain multiple contradictory narratives because their false persona doesn't align with their authentic history or actual behavior. Your empathic system is extraordinarily attuned to narrative coherence. When someone tells you their story and the pieces don't quite fit, when the timeline doesn't track, when their emotional effect doesn't match the content, when they contradict themselves in subtle ways, you feel it before you can consciously identify the specific inconsistencies. Jung worked with patients who could recount, with remarkable clarity, the exact moment they sensed someone was being dishonest, not because of what was said, but because of how the narrative felt. One patient described it as watching someone perform a play where they didn't quite know their lines. The pauses were slightly too long, the emotions slightly too rehearsed, the details either excessively specific or conveniently vague. Authentic people have narrative inconsistencies too. Memory is imperfect, emotions are complex, life is messy. But authentic inconsistency feels different from manipulative inconsistency. Authentic people will acknowledge gaps in their story or confusion about their own behavior. Manipulators will double down, become defensive, or subtly shift the narrative when questioned. The 6th rare trait is charm recognition and resistance. Jung understood that charm is often a sophisticated defense mechanism, a way of managing others' perceptions and controlling social dynamics. He distinguished between genuine warmth, which flows from authentic emotional connection, and strategic charm, which is deployed to disarm, distract, or manipulate. True empaths can feel the difference immediately. Strategic charm has a particular quality. It's slightly too smooth, too practiced, too perfectly calibrated to the audience. It lacks the organic awkwardness and imperfection of genuine human connection. Jung observed that manipulators study social dynamics the way a chess player studies the board. They learn what works, and they deploy it strategically. But this strategic deployment requires conscious effort, and that effort creates a subtle artificiality that your empathic system detects. Genuine warmth is responsive. It shifts based on the actual person you're interacting with and the authentic dynamic between you. Strategic charm is pre-programmed. It follows a script, however sophisticated that script might be. When someone is truly connecting with you, there's spontaneity, vulnerability, and mutual influence. When someone is charming you, there's a subtle sense that you're being handled, managed, or guided toward a predetermined outcome. The seventh and perhaps most powerful rare trait is future pattern projection. This goes straight to Jung's concept of the collective unconscious and his observation that certain psychological patterns are universal and predictable. Manipulators follow predictable behavioral patterns because they're operating from unintegrated shadow material. Once you recognize the pattern they're running, you can predict with remarkable accuracy how the relationship will unfold. Jung observed that the unconscious often knows the trajectory of a situation before the conscious mind can articulate it. Patients would report dreams or intuitions about how a relationship would deteriorate, sometimes months or years before the actual deterioration occurred. What they were picking up on were early warning signs, subtle behavioral indicators that, to their unconscious pattern recognition system, clearly pointed toward a specific outcome. When you meet a manipulator, some part of you already knows the full arc of the story. You sense the love-bombing phase will give way to devaluation. You sense the excessive generosity is creating a debt they'll eventually call in. This isn't pessimism or projection. This is your psyche recognizing a familiar archetypal pattern and extrapolating its logical conclusion. A patient described beginning to date someone who seemed perfect on paper, successful, attractive, attentive. But from the first date, they experienced a persistent low-level anxiety they couldn't explain. Everyone around them encouraged the relationship. They tried to override their discomfort with logical reasoning about the person's positive qualities. 6 months later, the partner's controlling and emotionally abusive behavior became undeniable. Looking back, the patient realized their anxiety from day one was their psyche recognizing the pattern and trying to protect them. What makes these 7 traits rare isn't that few people possess the underlying capacity, it's that most people have been socialized to override these perceptions. From childhood, we're taught to be polite, give people the benefit of the doubt, not judge others, trust what people say over what we feel. These are reasonable social guidelines for general interaction, but they become dangerous when applied to manipulative individuals who are actively exploiting social norms to gain access and control. Jung emphasized that psychological maturity involves integrating opposites, learning to hold both trust and discernment, both openness and boundaries, both compassion and self-protection. The socialization most of us receive teaches only one side of these polarities. We're taught to be trusting but not discerning, open but not boundaried, compassionate but not self-protecting. This creates a massive vulnerability that manipulators are skilled at exploiting. Let me get specific about how these 7 traits manifest in contemporary situations. Consider the workplace scenario. You've been hired into a new position and there's a colleague who immediately befriends you. They're warm, helpful, seemingly invested in your success. They offer insider information about office politics, warn you about difficult personalities, position themselves as your ally. Everyone else seems to appreciate this person, but something in you feels wrong. What your empathic system is detecting. This person's helpfulness is strategic positioning, not genuine connection. The insider information they're sharing creates indebtedness. The warnings about others are isolating you from forming your own relationships and judgments. Within months, this person will use the social capital they've built with you to manipulate situations to their advantage, potentially at your expense. Your incongruence detection is sensing the transactional nature beneath the friendly presentation. Your shadow recognition is picking up on hidden competitiveness or control needs. Your charm recognition notes the friendship feels slightly too perfectly calibrated. Your future pattern projection sees where this dynamic is heading. Or consider the romantic scenario. You meet someone who seems like everything you've been looking for. The connection feels intense and immediate. They're fascinating, attentive, seemingly deeply interested in understanding you at a profound level. The early phase is intoxicating. They mirror your values, share your interests, validate your experiences in ways you've rarely felt validated before. But underneath the intoxication, there's a subtle wrongness you can't quite name. Sometimes their intensity feels slightly off, too much too soon. Sometimes their interest in understanding you feels more like data collection than genuine curiosity. Sometimes their mirroring is so precise, it's unsettling. What you're detecting? This is the classic pattern Jung observed of persona inflation, someone constructing an idealized version of themselves specifically calibrated to your desires and vulnerabilities. They've studied you with remarkable attention, not because they love who you actually are, but because they're creating a customized lure. The intensity isn't depth, it's the energetic output required to maintain such a sophisticated fabrication. The cruel irony, your empathic sensitivity, the very trait that's trying to protect you, is part of what made you a target. Manipulators often seek out empathic individuals because your capacity for deep feeling, your desire for authentic connection, and your willingness to understand complexity make you valuable supply. Jung's concept of individuation becomes absolutely critical for empaths dealing with manipulation. Individuation is the process of becoming who you actually are, separate from the collective expectations, family patterns, and social conditioning that shaped you. For empaths, individuation specifically involves learning to trust your perception, even when it contradicts the consensus reality others are accepting. Jung observed that individuation often requires what he called the courage to be disliked. When your empathic perception reveals manipulation that others aren't seeing or don't want to acknowledge, speaking your truth will often result in social consequences. You'll be called paranoid, judgmental, difficult, or oversensitive. This isn't because you're wrong. It's because you're threatening the agreed-upon fiction that maintains the dysfunctional equilibrium. When you consistently override your empathic perception to maintain relationships with manipulative individuals, you're not just being kind or giving people chances. You're engaging in a form of self-harm. You're teaching your psyche that its protective mechanisms can't be trusted. Over time, this creates what Jung called a split in the psyche, a disconnection between what you know and what you allow yourself to acknowledge. Jung had a radical understanding of symptoms. They're not errors to be eliminated, but messages to be decoded. Your anxiety in the presence of a manipulative person isn't a disorder, it's appropriate pattern recognition. Your depression after ending a toxic relationship isn't weakness, it's your system grieving the fantasy of who you hoped that person could be. If this is resonating, if you're seeing yourself in these patterns, if this framework is giving language to experiences you've had, take a moment right now and subscribe to this channel. When you subscribe, you're ensuring you'll see the continuation of this work. More importantly, you're making a commitment to yourself that you're ready to prioritize your psychological development and protection. I'm going to give you 3 specific protocols Jung developed for integrating empathic sensitivity with appropriate self-protection. These aren't surface-level tips. These are profound practices that rewire how you relate to your perception and how you navigate relationships with potential manipulators. The first protocol is active imagination with the inner protector. Most empaths have overdeveloped their receptive capacity while underdeveloping their protective capacity. Set aside 15 minutes in a quiet space. Close your eyes and imagine a figure appearing who represents pure protection, not aggression, not cruelty, but fierce, unwavering commitment to your safety and well-being. This figure might appear as a warrior, an animal, an ancestor, or an abstract presence. Once the figure appears, engage in dialogue with it. Ask, "What have I been ignoring that you've been trying to tell me?" Your protector has been speaking through your anxiety, your physical discomfort, your dreams, your resistance to people and situations your conscious mind thought you should accept. This practice creates a direct line of communication between your conscious awareness and your protective instincts. The second protocol is shadow dialogue and discernment. When you're actively engaged with your own shadow, you can clearly distinguish between your material and others' material. Once a week, sit with this question: what am I currently judging in others that might actually be something I'm not acknowledging in myself? When you can honestly acknowledge your own shadow material, you become immune to manipulators who try to hook you through projection and guilt. They'll accuse you of being selfish, and instead of getting defensive, you'll be able to calmly assess whether you're actually being selfish in this situation or whether they're trying to manipulate you by exploiting your fear of being selfish. The third protocol is future timeline visualization and pattern completion. When you meet someone new and feel that subtle sense of wrongness, take time alone to do this visualization. Close your eyes and imagine a timeline extending from the present moment into the future. 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. Ask your unconscious to show you where this relationship is heading if you ignore your empathic warnings and proceed with full trust. After the visualization, ask yourself, if I knew with certainty this is where this relationship is heading, would I continue investing in it? This question cuts through all the rationalization, hope, and social pressure. It anchors you in psychological reality rather than fantasy. The more skillful you become at identifying and excluding manipulative individuals, the more energy and capacity you have available for genuinely healthy connections. You're not becoming closed, you're becoming selective. You're not becoming cold, you're becoming discerning. You're not becoming paranoid, you're becoming wise. Take what you've learned today and apply it immediately to a current situation in your life. Identify one person or situation where your empathic system has been sending you signals you've been ignoring. Make one decision today based on honoring that signal, even if it's uncomfortable, even if others don't understand, even if you can't fully articulate why. Maybe it's declining an invitation from someone who drains you. Maybe it's ending a conversation that feels extractive. Maybe it's acknowledging to yourself that a relationship everyone else thinks is wonderful actually feels wrong to you. Whatever it is, take one action today that honors your empathic perception over social expectations or other people's comfort. Look, we've just completed a deep psychological journey together. You've learned about 7 rare empathic traits that most people never develop conscious awareness of. You've gained insight into why manipulators specifically target empaths and how they exploit your gifts. You've received 3 powerful Jungian protocols for protecting yourself while maintaining your capacity for genuine connection. Subscribe so you continue receiving content that reinforces these principles and takes them deeper. Engage with the community in the comments so you have witnesses to your growth process. Most importantly, commit right now to implementing at least one protocol this week. Jung spent his life validating what empaths like you already know but have been taught to doubt. You're perceiving something real. Your discomfort around certain people isn't oversensitivity, it's accurate pattern recognition. Your resistance to relationships others think you should pursue isn't being difficult, it's psychological wisdom. Trust what you know, honor what you sense, act on what you perceive. This is the path forward, not to becoming less empathic, but to becoming an empowered empath who can fully offer your gifts to those who deserve them, while remaining absolutely protected from those who would exploit them. Your empathic perception is your superpower. Protect it fiercely, trust it completely, and use it wisely. You've got this.